the stories that build us. What if everything you believe about who you are was just a story you've been telling yourself? It's a simple question, but a quietly unsettling one. Beneath all the details that make up your sense of self, your name, your memories, your goals, the way you describe yourself to others, there might be something softer, something less certain. We move through the world assuming we are this collection of thoughts and labels. But what if those are only a kind of narrative scaffolding, a story whispered over and over until it feels like truth? Every person lives inside what could be called a personal mythology, an invisible, self-created narrative that defines who they are, what they value, and how they interpret everything that happens. It's not written down anywhere, but it runs beneath everything. It decides what feels meaningful, what feels threatening, what feels like me. Our personal mythology is like a private scripture. It tells us what's possible, what's forbidden, what's expected. It gives coherence to the chaos of living. We might not even realize how much of our daily life is guided by that invisible story, how every choice, reaction, and emotion traces back to some unspoken belief about who we think we are. These mythologies begin to form early in life. They start with simple experiences, the warmth of being comforted, the cold of being ignored, the moment we first understood that love could be withdrawn. Layer by layer, these experiences build into patterns, and the patterns turn into beliefs. Culture shapes them too. What we are told is good, successful, desirable, shameful. Memory takes fragments of truth and arranges them into something coherent enough to live inside. Like ancient myths once helped people explain lightning and death, our personal myths help us explain ourselves. They make the world feel knowable, containable. They let us say, "This is who I am. This is how things work. This is why I do what I do." But unlike the myths of old, our personal ones are quiet. They don't live in temples or books. They live in our habits, our fears, our automatic reactions. They shape our relationships, the stories we tell others, the ones we refuse to tell. And most of the time, we never stop to question them, because questioning them feels like questioning reality itself. These inner stories can be comforting. They make life feel stable, predictable. They give us an identity to hold on to, a place to stand in the middle of uncertainty. But they're also fragile. A personal mythology can shatter under the weight of a single event that doesn't fit its pattern. When that happens, we can feel as though the floor has disappeared. Disillusionment, identity crisis, existential confusion. These aren't just psychological states. They're what happens when the story we've lived inside suddenly stops making sense. The narrative thread that connected everything snaps, and for a moment, we don't know who we are. If our story breaks, do we break with it? That's the silent fear that runs beneath so many collapses. The sense that without our story, we will disappear. But maybe the collapse is not the end. Maybe it's the first glimpse of something deeper. Beneath the story, beneath the mythology, there might be a truth we've been avoiding. Something that doesn't need words or structure. To see it, though, we have to watch the story begin to fall apart. The fracture point. Every mythology has a breaking point, a fracture where the story can no longer hold itself together. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it happens quietly, in a moment that seems small from the outside, but feels seismic within. It might come after a loss, a failure, or a sudden change that reveals the limits of what we thought we knew. The world doesn't match the script anymore, and the narrative begins to crumble. Think of the successful professional who spent years climbing a ladder they now realize leans against the wrong wall. The achievements still shine, but the feeling is gone. The story that once gave their life meaning suddenly feels hollow, or the devoted believer who wakes up one morning with a question they can't unask, a small doubt that grows roots and begins to pull at the foundations of faith. They still want to believe, but belief no longer holds the same shape or the person who achieves everything they ever wanted. The home, the relationship, the recognition. They reach the summit only to find an unexpected silence there. The story promised joy, but instead, there's a kind of emptiness that hums quietly beneath the surface. These are the fracture points, psychological earthquakes. The story, once solid, begins to tremble. The plot lines no longer connect. The main character, you, doesn't feel convincing anymore. In moments like this, society gives us simple instructions. Fix it, repair the narrative, find yourself again. We rush to replace the broken story with a new one, a new career, a new relationship, a new goal to chase, anything to fill the silence. But what if collapse isn't failure? What if it's an invitation to stop, to listen, to see beyond the illusion of story altogether? When the narrative falls apart, something else appears in the space it leaves behind. A kind of raw, unfiltered awareness. It's uncomfortable at first, like waking up in a room without light. But slowly, your eyes adjust. You start to notice the texture of reality without the filter of who you thought you were. The silence after the story ends isn't a void. It's a beginning. When the story falls apart, what remains isn't emptiness. It's space, a blank page, waiting, not to be rewritten, but to be seen for what it is. The myth of progress. We live inside another kind of mythology too, one that tells us life is about progress, that meaning comes from improvement, that we are only as valuable as our next step forward. From childhood, we are told to keep climbing, learn more, earn more, do better, become someone. Growth becomes a moral law. Stagnation becomes sin. But what if progress is just another story, another layer of narrative that keeps us moving so we never have to be still? The roots of this myth run deep. The industrial age taught us that movement equals survival. Productivity became proof of worth. Later, self-help culture baptized this idea, turning life itself into a project of endless self-optimization. We don't just work, we hustle. We don't just rest, we recover. Even spirituality becomes a performance. Meditation tracked by apps, mindfulness measured by progress streaks. Every corner of existence becomes something to improve. We've built a civilization of doing, where being feels almost unnatural, but constant improvement carries a hidden exhaustion. Beneath the motivation quotes and goal-setting journals lies a collective weariness, the sense that no matter how much we do, it's never enough. We become characters in a myth of productivity, always in motion, never arriving. Every accomplishment fades into the next task. The finish line keeps moving, and in that endless chase, we forget the simple truth that life doesn't need to justify itself through progress. A flower doesn't strive to bloom better than yesterday. The ocean doesn't optimize its waves. What happens when we stop trying to be better and just be? In stillness, something shifts. The myth of progress begins to lose its power, and in the quiet that follows, a deeper realization surfaces. Existence itself doesn't need improvement. It's already complete. If progress isn't the purpose, then maybe collapse isn't destruction. Maybe it's revelation, the peeling away of illusion to reveal what was always there. The mirror without a face. Imagine the self as a mirror, reflecting whatever it's told it is. I am successful. I am kind. I am broken. I am strong. Each label, each memory, each belief is another reflection, shimmering back at you. But when the personal mythology collapses, that mirror goes blank. The reflections fade. What's left is the surface itself, still, silent, unmarked. Picture a mirror fogged by breath. You wipe it slowly, and for a moment, there's nothing. Just a pale blur. It's disorienting, even frightening, to see no image where you expect a self. But then comes a strange freedom. The absence of reflection isn't loss, it's openness. We spend so much of life trying to protect the reflection, polishing it, defending it, comparing it to others. But the self we cling to was never solid. It was a shifting pattern of memories and expectations, repeated until it seemed real. When the fog clears, we see that the mirror was never the reflection. It was always just the space that allowed everything to appear and disappear. In many spiritual traditions, this moment is described as ego death, the dissolution of the story self. It feels like dying because something is dying. The illusion of separateness, of being a fixed someone. And yet, what follows isn't annihilation, it's clarity. In that empty space, life continues, but lighter. You're no longer the hero or the victim, the achiever or the failure. You're simply awareness, quietly watching the story unfold without needing to control it. There's no longer a mirror full of faces, just the vastness that holds them all. When the myth fades and the mirror clears, what's left isn't nothing, it's everything, a wholeness too wide for any story to contain. The quiet rebirth, and then, after the collapse, the calm. The dust of identity settles. The noise of self-definition fades. What remains is not a rebuilt story, but life itself, seen without mythology. A quiet rebirth that doesn't announce itself, but hums softly in the background of every breath. This rebirth isn't dramatic. You don't become a new person overnight. You still wake up, eat breakfast, go to work, talk to friends. You still have preferences, fears, habits, but everything feels lighter now, less absolute. You live with the quiet understanding that all of it, every identity, every label, is just a story you happen to be telling in this moment. And because you know it's a story, you no longer need to defend it. You can let life move freely without needing to hold it still. This is the peace that follows collapse, the peace of seeing through the story, not erasing it. You play your role, but you no longer mistake for the whole truth. From this perspective, everything softens. Success doesn't mean as much, but it feels purer, free from the weight of self-worth. Failure doesn't sting as deeply because it no longer threatens your existence. You begin to live with a kind of gentle detachment, not indifference, but clarity. You no longer need the myth to be someone. You simply are. Life flows, not as a narrative to achieve, but as an unfolding presence. It's simple, but not empty. It's full, but not crowded. This is what lies beneath the collapse. A quiet, boundless being beyond story. The silence that's always been there, patiently waiting. And so the myths we live by, the ones that give us meaning, direction, identity, are beautiful, but temporary. They rise, they fall, they fade. When they collapse, don't rush to rebuild. Listen to what remains beneath them. That silence, that stillness, isn't the end of the story. It's what was never lost.